Okay, so let's get right into it. We hear about government shutdowns constantly, right? It's all political drama, last-minute deals, and this threat of Washington, D.C. just grinding to a halt. But what does that really mean for people? Beyond the headlines, who actually pays the price when the doors close? Well, that's what we're going to break down. And this quote from a former White House official named Dan Coe really just cuts right to the heart of it all. It perfectly sets up this fundamental unfairness that's baked into a government shutdown. It's a tale of two completely different realities, and it all depends on who you are. And here it is, laid out as clearly as it gets. You have a lawmaker whose pay is guaranteed by the Constitution itself, the highest law in the land. And then you have the janitor, working right there in the same building, whose paycheck has zero federal protection. None. It's this imbalance that really shows us who carries the weight of a shutdown. So let's dig into the details. How is this even possible? How can some paychecks be completely bulletproof while others just disappear? The answer, as you might guess, is in the law, starting with a very special rule for Congress. It all boils down to this phrase: constitutional compensation. See, Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution literally says that members of Congress shall receive a compensation for their services. Because it's written right there in the Constitution, their pay can't be shut off, even when funding for everything else dries up. And just to give you some context, this is the kind of guaranteed money we're talking about. Your average representative or senator gets $174,000 a year, and leadership, well, they make even more. And while people have tried to pass laws to stop this during shutdowns, nothing has ever stuck. Okay, but what about the millions of other federal workers? We're talking civil servants, active duty military. For them, things get a lot more complicated. Their paychecks do stop, but their story has a really important twist. So during a shutdown, federal employees basically get sorted into two buckets. You have your furloughed workers. They're deemed non-essential, so they're sent home. Then you have accepted workers. Think air traffic controllers, TSA agents. They're essential, so they have to keep working. But here's the kicker. In both situations, the paychecks stop. Now, here comes that twist I mentioned. Back in 2019, a law was passed, the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act, and it guarantees that all of these federal workers will get back pay for the time they missed. It's a crucial safety net, but, and this is a huge but, it only kicks in after the shutdown is already over. And this timeline just shows you the problem perfectly. It creates what you could call a paycheck gap. So you get your last check, everything's fine. Then, boom, the shutdown hits. Your income drops to zero. But your rent, your car payment, your grocery bills, they don't stop. And even when the shutdown ends, the stress isn't over. It can take weeks to process all that back pay, so the anxiety just drags on. So, the key takeaway for this group is this: the money is guaranteed. It's the law. It'll show up eventually. Now remember that, because the next group we're going to talk about has a totally different reality. And that brings us to federal contractors. For these folks, it's not a puzzle, it's a gamble, a really high-stakes gamble. And they're the ones who often get hit the hardest. And there it is. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Federal employees have a legal guarantee. Federal contractors, they have absolutely nothing. They're stuck in this legal void with no safety net to catch them. So who are these contractors? Well, they're the janitors, the security guards, the cafeteria staff in federal buildings. They don't work directly for the government. They work for private companies that the government hires. And that 2019 law for back pay, it doesn't apply to them. There was even a bill in 2023 to try and fix this, but it went nowhere. Which leads us to the real gut punch of a question. If the government isn't on the hook for their pay and their company's contract is on hold, what happens to their income? And here's the brutally honest answer, again from Dan Coe. The private companies they work for aren't required to pay them when the government contract is frozen. As he says, you can't rely on the goodness of heart of a company. So for most of these workers, the pay stops and it never comes back. Now, beyond the immediate paychecks, shutdowns create these aftershocks. They send ripples through the entire economy and cause real long-term damage to the government itself. These are the hidden costs that stick around long after the political fight is over. You see, the impact isn't just on government workers. Think about the local economies, the restaurants, the coffee shops that depend on those federal employees as customers. They get hurt badly. And it spreads even further. Some estimates say up to 10 million private sector jobs are tied to federal money. When the government stops paying its bills, the whole system feels it. All right, I want you to look at this number, 10%. What do you think that could be? It's not about the economy. It's about something much harder to measure. It's about morale. Yeah, research found that the psychological shock of a shutdown, of being treated like a pawn in some political game, is so damaging that it feels like taking a 10% pay cut. So even after the back pay finally arrives, the damage to trust has already been done. And that damage leads directly to something called a brain drain. It's a pretty simple and pretty destructive process. First, the shock to morale makes people question their career. Then, talented younger folks start leaving for more stable jobs in the private sector. At the same time, experienced older workers just decide it's not worth the stress and retire early. And what's the result? The government loses priceless skills and knowledge. So the next time you hear that a government shutdown is over, the real question isn't just about when people get their back pay. It's about who was lost for good. The contractors who never got that lost income back, and the talented public servants who just decided they'd had enough. That is the real, lasting price of a shutdown.